I'm Gary Nickerson,
And I'm Quinn Taggart.
and this is Outside My Window. While the House of Commons recessed for the summer, that doesn't mean our elected officials sat around. It's a very busy time for them. It gives them an opportunity to get out into the various communities in their ridings. Our guest in this segment is Chris D'Entremont. He's the Conservative West Nova MP, also Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons. Chris, it's very good to have you back on our podcast.
Yeah, great to have us on.
Chris, as we're recording this, it's a day after the death of Queen Elizabeth II. First of all, your thoughts at this time.
Well, it's definitely a time of mourning. She is our sovereign. Whether you're a supporter of the monarchy or not, we have certain instances that people sit and, look at the Queen. She's been our Queen for 70 years now. She's the only Queen that we've known, and the only monarch we've known. So there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be upset about it, are going to watch with great attention, what happens over the next number of days when it comes to the burial of Her Majesty, and then the coronation of King Charles. So a number of things that have to happen, from a parliamentary standpoint. I mean, everybody's known as we've sworn allegiance to the monarch and their heirs, which is we don't have to go and redo our oaths of office. But a lot of stuff has been built around the Queen, right? Her Majesty has a lot to do with a lot of the traditions in the House of Commons and in many different legislatures. So a lot of that needs to change. Simple things like lawyers who are QCs or Queen's Counsel will now have to change their business cards to say King's Counsel. There's a lot of little things that we don't realize in our day-to-day activity that are related back to that monarchy, or how our Canadian democracy is built around having that head of state. So there's a number of things that we'll end up having. But let's go through the next number of weeks when we see the processions and the many nice words that will be said about Queen Elizabeth, and how she has been the only queen that we've known.
As an average guy living an average life like myself, first thing that comes to mind when I think of that is, are we going to leave her on the money?
I'm thinking that we'll still see her face on our money for a long time to come, but I'm going to probably see there will be a transition to His Majesty's face over the next bit. So as the reprinting of certain dollar bills are being done, or the reprinting of our loonie or toonie or one of those, that his face will end up showing up on these things. But you're not going to take all that money, of course, out of circulation. Well, I mean, I was sort of reflecting on that yesterday. When you think that one of the very first prime ministers that she did work with, is Churchill. On the eve or the end of World War II, and she's had, I forget, there's 13 Canadian prime ministers that she's dealt with. I forget how many British prime ministers. You've seen a change of the Commonwealth of being a Britain only kind of organization, a colonization, if you look at that, to a more open worldly organization. We might say we have a constitutional monarchy, but quite honestly, we're definitely an independent country, and many other countries have done the same. To a certain point, that there's been tremendous change in other countries that have removed that constitutional monarchy and have sort of moved on. They're still members of the great Commonwealth, but at the same time, they're independent. So many of those changes happened under her. She became a very important statesperson, talking about very important things for our populations, and then sort of trying to stay out of the throes of politics. And I think that's been her success. I mean, is she, which way does she lean politically? We don't know. She served with all of these different governments over time, and has been a helpful hand throughout all of those processes. Even to the full independence here of Canada, the repatriation of our constitution. There's many things that I would suggest that she was very instrumental in supporting as Canadians, and we should recognize that. But then again, in the Southwest Nova Scotia, where we have a lot of Acadians, the British monarchy might not be our favorite thing. So there's a good balance. There's a good balance in the way we see her, but in also in the way we see the British monarchy itself.
Let's move on to another subject. Recently in the news, we're hearing now from the provincial government of Tim Houston and comments by Minister Kim Esland that they're very concerned about the ferry numbers, and there is a possibility of the government looking at canceling the service. Kind of like, gee, here we go again.
Yeah, well, I mean, ultimately, the numbers are not what we kind of expected or what Bay Ferries had laid out for us this year. So is it disappointing? Well, it is a little bit. It's an 11% drop. But if we look at how prosperous the area has been, even with the number of passengers that have come across on the ferry, the renewed interest in our area as a destination, I think has all been wonderful. And we have to understand, I mean, there had been no ferry for 3 years. It's going to take a while to build the clientele on that vessel once again. So, did they win this year? No, but they got themselves in the playoffs. So maybe next year we'll get in the playoffs. Maybe there'll be more people coming forward.
No, I mean, the contract is not up until 2026. And realistically, there'll be another provincial election before that happens. But, based on the tone, and I know sometimes you can't really draw it from that, but based on the tone of that comment, is there an out for us in this?
I don't know. I mean, depends on how you look at that contract. The contract does have some kind of responsibility on behalf of Bay Ferries. So the ferry has to, at some point, meet its obligations to that contract. But we also know that it's going to take some time. We've all said it, this is going to take 5 years to be able to build the right numbers of it. So to be disappointed in year one, yeah, okay, but there's still more time in this contract.
Yeah, I think that certainly we just got to calm down a little bit and be realistic. It's unfortunate the comment was made and the answer was given in the fashion that it was, but I hate to say wait and see, but that seems like that's probably what we were going to need to do.
Yeah, no, I think we're going to have to wait and see. But yeah, I'm not going to give them the failing grade this year. It was the first year out. Americans aren't traveling. It's not the fault of Bay Ferries or the Yarmouth Ferry that people weren't on it. It has to do with the actual, global feeling that people have on traveling, the way the way Americans aren't traveling right now. The COVID requirements to come to Canada, the actual usage of the ArriveCan app. Those are things that actually affected, I think, more than the availability of the ferry or the marketing of the ferry. I think the government of Canada got in the way of those numbers.
But now that we're out of the way of that, right? Like a lot of that stuff is all gone by the wayside, right?
ArriveCan is still there. The confusion of ArriveCan and how to come to Canada and who needs to be vaccinated, who doesn't need to be vaccinated, is still very much a part of it. There's a number of articles on CBC and a couple of other places. And the problem that many of these border towns are having, I mean, some places there isn't even internet. So, they get to the border crossing and they didn't fill out their paperwork correctly and they're being denied, and they need to go back and try to find some kind of service at a local library to fill out that paperwork. So people are trying this at home, they're finding it confusing and therefore deciding not to come. So we're seeing that in many places across Canada, and I'm sure that Yarmouth is exactly the same. So people decided to come on that ferry because of the confusion around ArriveCan. They decided not to come.
Well, certainly I personally have not been on a plane in 3 years. Travel by boat actually was appealing. And I almost went, but then, things kind of spiked up. You're in the seventh wave. Things kind of dissuaded me from doing that. But you're right. I mean, I looked at some of the stuff and it was confusing.
It's confusing all around, and I think it's easier for us to head to the United States. So I'm sure Canadians have traveled to the States, but I would say that probably not too many Americans have traveled up here as much as we want to. Not to the numbers of when we had Scotia Prince, or we had or we had the Blue Nose, or even the first few iterations of the Cat, right? So there's still some time, and we're just going to have to get used to traveling with some of these extra responsibilities or requirements, and it'll all take time. But to say we're disappointed in the numbers today with all of those things that we know, I think was probably a little premature.
We always try to take an opportunity to educate folks a bit over who's responsible for what. At the current iteration of the ferry and how things are going, what's the federal government's responsibility there?
Yeah, we're responsible for the port. We're responsible for the service of customs, making sure the immigration pieces are there. We've invested heavily in the renovation of the ferry terminal itself, and of course of all the grounds on it. So that's all been sort of the responsibility of the feds, while the operation of that vessel's been, all up to the province and Bay Ferries itself. So, which is different than the way it was in the past. I mean, in the past, of course, the federal government paid for Marine Atlantic and the Blue Nose, and in that divestiture back in the late '90s by the Martin and then the Chrétien Liberals, it's created that void, and it took the province to have to pick some of that up. But the challenge is today, when we look at balancing or competing requirements of government, with a health system that's in trouble, and the other needs that we have, is the right investment in a ferry? Well, I would say it is, because of the economic activity that it does create. But it is hard when it's just a numbers game. This is the trap that the NDP fell in when they canceled it the first time, is that they looked at it strictly as that investment. They did not look at the return of it. So we need to continue to look at that return.
Since we talked to you the last time on our podcast, there was a deal made between Justin Trudeau and the federal Liberal government, and Jagmeet Singh and the NDP. Basically, propped up the Trudeau government for a couple of more years. So what are your thoughts on that? Was that fair? Was that democratic? I know that NDP wanted to push forward their plans, certainly for some health care and dental care and all of that, but did it rob Canadians of a fair election?
Well, I mean, for those people that aren't happy with government, would see it as unfair, because they would, of course, want, at the earliest occasion, to have an election to try to take out that government. But at the same time, it is the prerogative. Canadians vote for individuals, and therefore for parties, and the party made a decision to sign off with the Liberals. The challenge that it creates is, at what point do NDP voters look at this and say, well, I voted NDP. Where are the NDP issues? Okay, well, dental care, sure, is one of the NDP priorities. But until we see what the response is from the government that's going to be coming this fall, whether the NDP will remain on side. So as much as it gave us a little bit of stability over a number of months, I don't think it gives us that complete stability. There's going to be a point where the NDP are going to say, sorry guys, you didn't live up to our agreement, and we'll go back to the normal run of things in the minority situation. I think Canadians as a rule were tired of elections for a little bit, so it maybe gave them a reprieve this summer. But I'm going to continue to be ready for any eventuality over the next year or two.
So when the House sits back in the fall, what's on the docket? What's first up?
Well, ultimately, I think we'll still be talking about economy. We'll still be talking about cost of living, those kinds of things. It's what we hear the most from our constituents. People continue to complain about the price of fuel, even though it's been going down. We're still not where it probably is comfortable.
I'd love to see 65 cents a liter again.
Well, I remember not so long ago when I had a little diesel Volkswagen, I was paying 25 cents a liter. So, I'd love to have those days back.
Relief at the pump is one thing, but I think that, when it comes to all of the other inflationary items like food costs and housing and everything else, that's where it really hits people in the wallets.
Yeah, I mean, most of these things can be looked back at energy, whether it's fuel for trucking, whether it's the production of these things require electricity. So a lot of this is all connected sort of in that same sphere. So we need to have a better look at how we're, I wouldn't say rebate things, but there's got to be a serious look at the cost of doing business here in Canada and finding ways to cut some of that. We had proposed, way back when the House was sitting, we had proposed a change of just the GST, just take off the GST because it's, in a lot of cases, it's tax on tax. And of course, that was rejected. We see the provincial government today looking at the implementation of a carbon tax in Nova Scotia, and just say, the 14 cents extra a liter of fuel is just, this is not the right time to do it. And, here's a plan that reduces our emissions in Nova Scotia that are far beyond what you're asking for other provinces, and that's being rejected. So, I think those kind of discussions will find themselves on the floor of the House of Commons this year.
Do you think that maybe, given the current situation with NS Power, that should revert back to the government rather than, keep it in the private sector where it is now?
Well, I think one of the biggest mistakes Nova Scotia as a government did was to give 100% of that away or sell 100% of it. It was in a financial crunch at the time, but ultimately they should have maybe kept 51% of it, so they had some kind of stake in how things are operated. There are still things legislatively that the province of Nova Scotia could do to change how Emera and Nova Scotia Power operates, and try to find mechanisms to do the things that they need to do. I mean, their biggest issue right now is trying to figure out how to create this Atlantic loop so that it connects us, Nova Scotia, to New Brunswick and Newfoundland and into the States and back over to Quebec, so that there's a readily available of hydroelectricity available to us, so we don't have to use the charcoal. Charcoal, that's the wrong word, but
Coal.
the coal power plants. So just those changes, which are billions of dollars worth of investments, saves megatons of CO2 into our atmosphere. So there's going to be play roles for the governments to play, but in some cases, I think the governments have to push back on Nova Scotia Power and say, no, it's your responsibility. I'm sorry. And you can't dump that. You can't dump that on the shoulders of Nova Scotians either.
Over the summer, what have you been hearing from people in your constituency?
Well, I mean, it's been a good summer where we've been to many activities across West Nova, and everybody's from Canada Day in Burlington to the Wedgeport tuna fishing tournament. There's lots of people that come out. They were just aching to be part of their communities once again. So in a lot of cases, people were just in great moods. On the other side, people are still talking about, again, that cost of living. We do hear a little bit about spraying lately that's popped up. But mostly provincial responsibility. So we'll continue to work with the local MLAs on some of those issues, and of course, healthcare. Healthcare continues to permeate our discussions of access to primary care, and that continues to be a challenge for many provinces. So I think maybe federally we've got to come up with a better plan on funding, and that's another thing the current government has been really slow at trying to address.
Chris, do you think politics in this country has become even more polarized in the last couple of years, since the pandemic, since the truckers' strike, which I even hate to mention, but anyway, but has there been a further polarization, a further division between, the left and the right, and within your own party, within the Conservative Party, has there been any internal polarization?
Canada is divided, and we can lay blame on a bunch of different facets. Part of it is the bleed over of American politics into Canadian politics. People consume far more American news than they do Canadian news. So when people are upset with certain things going on, I find that they use American examples rather than Canadian, or based on American tradition rather than Canadian tradition. So we see a lot of that. Secondly, of course, social media has polarized many things. It's a breeding ground for I would say, very dangerous discussions in a lot of cases. Very one-sided discussions, sometimes based on tremendous misinformation. That's created lots of problems, and it's bled over into our political system. Within the Conservative Party, there has been challenges with a number of the leadership candidates, but I have to say, some of them are based in reality, but some of them have to be dispelled. And I'm hoping once the leadership is complete, the party wants to come together again and work on what's important to Canadians rather than what's just important to the Conservative Party of Canada. So there's a number of challenges, and it's been difficult over the last number of months with that leadership going on.
As an Acadian, 2024 is going to represent a banner year. Can you talk a little bit about the Congrès and what's coming up?
Congrès Mondial 2024 is going to be a phenomenal time for Southwest Nova Scotia. To see the investments from the different levels of government is extremely important. That people, it shows the governments believe in this process and believe in getting this community together on a regular basis. I think it's going to bring a number of things to us. And I mean, not only the tourism dollars, the visits that we're going to get, but also, back in 2004 when we did it, when it was a provincial issue, we were able to bring in the French Services Act. There was a fierté to be Acadian once again, or to be francophone again. We saw an increase in our student enrollment in the CSAP. So I think it gives us a boost every number of years of Acadians. I mean, Acadians, we're here. We know our communities. We're proud of our language and our culture. But every year there's less and less of us. That culture continues to evolve into something else, as many cultures will happen. So we need to do everything that we can to try to maintain that, and things like the Congrès are very important for that. So there's a cultural issue that's very important, but there's also that tourism part that's going to be awesome for our area.
So what's already been confirmed, or is there anything confirmed as far as activities go, and what kind of date range are we looking at?
Nothing's been completely done yet. I mean, there was a certain dates that were talked about during the announcement, but it's mostly summer 2024. There's a number of events that will happen. They're still trying to figure out where, the big opening and the big closing will happen, how the families will participate in this. So, there's still a lot of work to do. We're really 2 years behind, even though we kind of know what we were doing. The same people are there. Vaughn Madden from Belleville, originally from Belleville. She was the manager of the 2004 one. She was the manager of the one in Moncton. She will be the manager of this one. So there's a tremendous amount of continuity within the organization to pull these things together. Alistair Surratt was the president of the Congrès Mondial in 2004, and therefore is the president of the Congrès Mondial 2024. So a lot of faces are returning, and the processes are in place. So hopefully over the next little bit, we'll find out exactly what's going to be transpiring.
Certainly excited to see that come together.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So just on a personal note, did you get some time with the family? Did you get to fire up the big green egg? What have you been doing?
Well, I mean, we've been doing a lot of cooking on the barbecue. That's been awesome. Got some camping done. We actually were able to hook up the camper to the truck and did a little tour of Nova Scotia and into New Brunswick a little bit. So, we did get a little bit of time to ourselves, which I think is important for our family. Of course, both boys are off to university. Well, actually, one boy's off to university. The other guy has a new job at the Yarmouth Hospital. So he's a nurse in the hospital. So,
well, good for him.
Good stuff going on there. And, of course, Anne's back at work at the school. So.
No, that's excellent. That's excellent. Maybe we can employ some of your barbecue skills in the near future. We'll do a cooking show.
Well, I'd love to do a cooking show, and maybe show off how badly I can do ribs or what have you. I think we all have a method, and some of it works well and some of it doesn't. But definitely one of the favorite things that I have is I get to come home and cook for the family. So, if there's ever a benefit of being able to cook, at least I don't have to do the dishes.
Yeah, it's a little rough doing the Big Green Egg in Ottawa, I'm sure.
Well, considering my apartment doesn't have a deck, it would be very, very difficult. But
I think your landlord would certainly frown on that in the middle of the living room.
yeah, well, definitely would not feel that was the right thing to do.
Chris, it's always great to talk to you. We really appreciate your time, and all the best to you and your wife and sons. And we'll be watching in the house.
Yeah, sounds good. I got someone at the door already. Have a great day.
All right, take care.
Okay, cheers.
I'm Gary Nickerson,
And I'm Quinn Taggart.
and this has been Outside My Window.